Right now, a 30-year-old case just got dragged back into the sunlight. Not in Brazil, but in Washington, D.C., because this week, witnesses tied to the Varginha UFO incident showed up at the National Press Club, and they're not whispering anymore. They're naming names, describing what they saw, pressing on the same nerve every so-called crash retrieval story seems to hit. Here's the part that should make you pause. If the Varginha UFO incident is just folklore, why are people still willing to put their reputations on the line in 2026 to talk about it? Stay with me, because by the end of this episode, the weirdest question won't be, was it aliens? It'll be, what kind of system reacts this aggressively to a story that's supposedly fake? If this is all nonsense, why does it keep triggering the same response pattern every time in every country? All right, welcome back to Broadcasting Seeds. I am your host, Bennett Tanton, and today's episode lands squarely in Weird World Wednesday, where we slow things down midweek and look at cases that refuse to stay buried, no matter how much dirt gets thrown on them. So today, that case is the Varginha UFO incident, often called Brazil's Roswell, okay? So the reason it's back in the conversation right now is simple. The public UAP press conference just happened in Washington, D.C., featuring witnesses connected to Varginha and renewed claims about military recovery operations. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I mean, this happened yesterday. That's never been the point of this show. What I'm here to do is ask better questions than the headlines are asking. Because even if you believe Varginha was misidentification, rumor, or mass suggestion, you still have to explain the pattern, the military presence, all of the hospital stories, the intimidation claims as well, and why, decades later, this case still has enough weight to pull people into the spotlight again. The most believable part of a lot of UFO cases isn't the craft. It's what happens afterwards. And on this episode, we're going to walk through what's claimed and what's documented and what keeps slipping through the cracks. Not to prove aliens, right? But to understand why some stories behave like pressure points instead of campfire tales. Before we step into this, real quick, if you get value out of this kind of work, help the show grow. Hit like, share the episode, leave a review. That's how Broadcasting Seeds survives and finds new listeners. And send this to a friend who loves Roswell, hates official explanations, and always says, yeah, but something feels off. We all have those friends. I am one of those friends. And if you're a researcher, creator, or investigator working in this space and you've got grounded insight, I'm always open to professional collaboration. No hype, no nonsense, just clarity. All right, let's move deeper into the Varginha UFO incident and start where every cover-up story claims it began. Section 1, the night Varginha changed. Let's rewind to January 20th, 1996 in the city of Varginha. This is part of the Varginha UFO incident that almost everyone skips past. Not the rumors, not the documentaries, the moment before the story became radioactive. It's said to have been a normal Saturday, hot, humid, loud in that uniquely Brazilian middle of the day way. And then within hours, multiple witnesses across the city reported something falling from the sky. Not hovering, not gliding, dropping hard. Firefighters were called. Military vehicles were seen moving in and out of neighborhoods that basically had no reason to be locked down. And then came the encounter that would turn this from a UFO sighting to something else entirely. 3 young women walked through the Jardim Andir neighborhood, said they saw a creature crouched near a wall. So you've got this report, a small, oily skinned, red eyed creature, a posture that didn't look injured, but defensive, and the kind of stance animals take when they're cornered. Now, pause here, because this is where most people laugh and check out. But here's the problem. Those girls didn't go looking for attention. They didn't sell interviews, and their descriptions stayed consistent. Even to this day, even after national media turned them into punchlines, okay? People don't usually invent trauma in matching detail, then carry it quietly for decades. Within hours, reports started stacking. Hospital workers described the arrival of something unusual. Military police sealed off areas that didn't make sense to seal. And then there's a detail that still makes this case itch under the skin. A Brazilian military officer allegedly handled one of the beings without protection. He later developed a severe infection and died within weeks. Officially, the cause was unrelated, but unofficially, this is where the story takes a darker turn. Because the Varginha UFO incident didn't unfold like a random hoax. It unfolded like a response protocol. Rapid containment, information suppression, witness intimidation claims, and then silence. When a story moves faster than the narrative control, institutions don't debate it. They bury it. And so here's the nudge forward. If this were just a case of misidentification, why did the military take point instead of the local authorities? Why were records sealed? And why were hospital staff warned not to speak? And most importantly, why did this small Brazilian city suddenly become the center of an operation that looked way bigger than it needed to be? This is where Weird World Wednesday earns its name, because even skeptics admit something happened. They just disagree on what it was. And when people say nothing to see here, they're usually ignoring the same pattern we see in Roswell, Rendlesham, and more recently, modern UAP cases discussed at places like the National Press Club, including events hosted by filmmakers like James Fox, who also hosted this one. Different decade, different country, same muscle memory. The question isn't, was it aliens? The question is, why does authority panic look the same everywhere? And that's where we're headed next. Because once the night ended, the real story didn't disappear, but it fractured. And those fractures are where the truth usually leaks out. Section 2, the medical silence and the military wall. Because the Varginha UFO incident didn't fade after the sightings, it tightened. Here's where things move from strange to more structured. Multiple witnesses, including hospital staff, claim that shortly after the initial encounters, Unusual security measures appeared at medical facilities in Virginia. Not local police, military police, armed, quiet, watching who went in and who came out. That alone should make you pause. Hospitals deal with chaos every day. Accidents, violence, disease, car crashes, all the stuff. They don't lock down unless someone tells them to. And someone did. Doctors and nurses later described seeing a creature brought into care, small, non-human, emitting a strong odor that made people physically ill. And I think this is the ammonia that one of the witnesses has said. One physician would later say the image never left him, even decades later. Now, here's the uncomfortable part, because every episode has to have one. Several medical professionals who spoke informally early on later went silent. Not because they forgot things, because they were warned. Careers were at stake. Licenses, families, careers were at stake. Okay? When witnesses stop talking all at once, it's usually not because they are changing their minds. It's because they were told to. Then there's the military side. Eyewitnesses reported Brazilian army vehicles moving through the city in ways that made no logistical sense. Routes changed, roads were blocked, civil authorities were sidelined, and according to multiple accounts, elements connected to the Brazilian army were not operating alone. This is where rumors of foreign involvement enter the story, specifically alleged coordination with U.S. personnel. Officially, that never happened. Unofficially, witnesses say it did. Bodies were removed, materials got transported, and documentation of these incidents were sealed. And this is the point where skeptics usually say that's where it gets big too. But history tells us something different. All right. Large operations don't start large. They start small. Then they scale fast when panic sets in. Cover-ups don't begin with lies. They begin with urgency. And years later, the Brazilian military released statements explaining the incidents away. Misidentified individuals and weather balloons and public hysteria. But those explanations never accounted for the hospital lockdowns or the sealed records or the intimidation claims. And lately, people are starting to notice that again, especially after new testimony surfaced during a public event at the National Press Club, where witnesses tied to the Varginha UFO incident spoke openly. Some for the first time in decades. This is alongside filmmaker James Fox. You don't have to believe every word they say, of course, but you do have to explain why this many people from different backgrounds, separated by years, keep describing the same pressure points: medical silence, military control, and records that just vanish. If nothing extraordinary happened, the response was wildly disproportionate. And that's the nudge forward. Because once the military locks a story down, the truth doesn't just disappear, it goes underground. And underground stories, they don't die, they wait. Next, we need to talk about why this case resurfaced now, who benefits from reopening it, and why time may be the enemy of secrecy. That's where this gets personal. Section 3, why Varginha came back now. And here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Stories don't resurface just by accident. And the Varginha UFO incident didn't crawl back into the spotlight because the internet just got bored. It came back now because time changes the power balance. Witnesses get older and age, and institutions calcify. Secrets get heavier to carry by the government or other institutions. And lately, people are starting to notice that. So this week, yesterday, at the National Press Club, a press conference put Varginha back on the table, not as a retro UFO curiosity, as an unresolved case with living witnesses who are done waiting. The event was organized with the help of filmmaker James Fox, whose work has focused less on spectacle and more on testimony that refuses to basically disappear. So now, pause for a second. A real press conference is not a podcast rant. It's not a TikTok clip, and it's not a YouTube thumbnail. It's where you go when you want your words on record, right? People don't step up at the National Press Club to tell ghost stories. The witnesses who spoke weren't influencers. They're not chasing clout. I mean, maybe they are, but highly unlikely. They are older, and they're measured and very aware that once you say something publicly like this, you don't get to take it back. So why do it? Because time weakens threats. Because NDAs, they expire. Because people who warned you not to talk retire, die, or lose relevance. And because carrying something like this alone for 30 years, that kind of weight does something to a person. That's the human layer of a lot of analysis that a lot of analysis misses. And the Varginha UFO incident isn't just a mystery. Man, it's a pressure cooker. And pressure cookers, they eventually have to vent. And secrecy works best when witnesses are young and afraid. It works worst when they're old and tired. There's also a bigger backdrop here. Right now, UAP conversations are no longer fringe, right? Congressional hearings and whistleblower claims, tons of declassified footage. The cultural guardrails that once kept these stories locked away, man, they're cracking. And that matters. Because when one case gets permission to exist, others, they just follow. And Varginha fits the pattern people are finally willing to talk about. Not just something in the sky, but we're talking retrievals and containment and medical involvement. That's a different category of story, and institutions know it. Lights in the sky are curious, okay? Bodies on the ground, man, they're destabilizing. And this is why this show exists. Not to scream disclosure, but to track the slow, uncomfortable shift where stories move from taboo to tolerated. And here's another nudge forward. If Varginha was nothing, but reopening costs nothing. But if it wasn't, then every new witness, every press event, and every resurfaced document is a liability, not just for Brazil, for anyone who helped carry the secret. And that's why the real question isn't whether aliens landed in 1996. It's why the system still reacts like it's afraid of what happens if people compare notes. Next, we're going to step back and look at this pattern that I keep talking about itself. Not Varginha alone, but why these cases echo and rhyme each other across decades and borders. Because once you see that pattern, it's so hard to unsee. Section 4, the pattern behind the Varginha UFO incident. Here's where Varginha stops being a wild Brazil story and starts feeling just like a template. Because the most unsettling thing about Varginha is not the creature description, it's the sequence. Something unusual is reported. People on the ground describe it in messy human language, that it's confusing and emotional, and it's not polished at all. Then the response tightens up fast, and military presence, restricting access, and warnings. Official explanations that sound clean, almost too clean, and then years later, the story gets recategorized as myth. And while the people who lived it keep insisting it was real, that pattern is exactly why the case is back in the conversation right now. On January 20th, 2026, yesterday, the National Press Club press conference listing described a landmark UAP press conference hosted by filmmaker James Fox, focused on firsthand witnesses and alleged crash retrieval related claims, including Varginha. That is not a random fan event. That is someone trying to take a long rumored story and put it in the realm of formal public record. Okay. And when a case moves from documentaries to a press conference, somebody is trying to change its legal weight, not just its popularity. Now, I want to stay grounded here. Even the mainstream summary of the Varginha incident acknowledges a key tension: the sightings, the claims of unusual activity, and the official Brazilian military conclusion that the girls likely mistook a local man for a creature, plus the claim that troop movements were routine. That official conclusion has existed for years, and it's part of why the case stays controversial. So you have two realities. One reality says misinformation, rumor, and a story that grew legs. The other reality says an event occurred, authorities reacted like it mattered, and witnesses got pushed into silence. So here's where this gets sticky. Both realities can produce the same public outcome. If the truth is extraordinary, you lock it down. If the truth is embarrassing, like a botched operation, a training exercise that went wrong, or a panic response, you also lock it down. Sometimes cover up is not hiding aliens. Sometimes it's hiding incompetence. This is why the keyword phrase matters today. The Varginha incident is a perfect case to test how we think. Do we automatically trust institutions because they sound confident? Do we automatically trust witnesses because they sound emotional? Or do we look for the pattern, the incentives and the timing and the pressure points? Because lately, with UAPs being discussed in broader culture again, people are going back and re-listening to old cases with new ears. And the media coverage around this press conference event is already framing it as a renewed push to get lawmakers to pay attention. The biggest shift is not new evidence, it's new permission to talk about it. And here's the doorway we end up in. If Varginha is a test case, what happens when more Virginias get pulled into formal settings, in public, with cameras rolling? Does truth come out? Or do we just get better, more professional versions of the same old fog? Here's where I want to leave you. Not with answers, with responsibility. Because the Varginha incident isn't asking you to believe in aliens. It's asking you to decide how you process authority, testimony, and uncertainty right now. while these conversations are happening in real time. And lately, people are starting to notice something. Old cases are being dusted off. Witnesses are aging out of fear, and institutions are responding slower than they used to. And the cultural permission structure around UAPs and UFOs, secrecy and the government transparency is frankly cracking. That doesn't mean disclosure is coming tomorrow, folks. It means the ground is definitely shifting. And when the ground shifts, stories that were once safe to dismiss become dangerous again. Not because they're true, but because they're unresolved. Unresolved stories don't demand belief, but they do demand attention. And if you're listening to this as someone who leans skeptical, that's amazing. That's good. Skepticism is absolutely healthy. But healthy skepticism doesn't stop at laughing something off. It asks, what would explain this response? And if you're listening as someone who leans open-minded, that's fine too, because curiosity does matter. But real curiosity doesn't jump to conclusions. It sits with the discomfort. That's the lane Broadcasting Seeds lives in. We don't chase certainty. We chase clarity. And clarity sometimes means saying, I don't know what happened at Varginha, but I know the reaction to it matters. Because whether this was extraterrestrial, experimental, psychological, or freaking bureaucratic panic, the same question still remains. Why did the system act like it had something to lose? The truth doesn't always hide, and sometimes it just waits until you're ready to look at it honestly. If this episode made you pause, helped you think, or unsettled you a little, do me a favor. Like the episode, share it, leave a review. That's how this show survives and grows without playing games. Send it to a friend who doesn't care about UFOs, but cares deeply about truth, power, and accountability. And if you're a researcher, investigator, medical professional, historian, creator working near cases like this, I'm open to grounded collaboration. No hype, no nonsense, just adults comparing notes. Next Wednesday, we'll open another file, different case, same pressure points. Until then, keep your feet on the ground, but don't ignore the cracks.
Hot pavement, cicadas cry. January sun, something fell from the sky. 3 girls froze by a broken wall. Red eyes watching, not blinking at all. Sirens came, but they weren't for help. Green trucks rolled like they knew themselves. Doctors whispered, doors locked tight. Something breathing in the hospital light. They said, calm down. They said, don't stare. But fear doesn't move unless something's there. Oh, Varginha, you're not alone. Same old secret, different tone. Under the drums and the radio hum. Truth don't die, it just goes numb. Hands up high, torches low. They bury the fire, but the stories grow. Under the stars, under cover of skies. Same sky, same lies. Boots on tile, orders his. Names crossed out that don't exist. A man touched skin he shouldn't have paid the price no flag could mask. They called it rumor, called it fear, but fear don't march with military gear. And silence doesn't smell like bleach or linger where the living preach. Say it was nothing, say we were wrong. Why does the echo last this long? Oh, Varginha. Oh, Varginha. Truth Samba beat in a minor key, dancing with what we're not meant to see. Paper walls and official seals can't stop time from cracking the reel. From Roswell dust to Brazilian rain, different language, same refrain. When the system moves too fast, it's scared of what it can outlast.
Oh, Varginha,
You're not alone.
same old secret.
Different tone
Under the drums and the
radio hum. Truth don't die, it just goes numb. Nothing strange ever happens here. Under the stars, under watchful eyes. Same sky, same lies. Keep your feet on the ground. But listen, when the drums start talking.